Today's Movie Verdicts episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here with you, and I'm excited for today's episode where I am once again joined by my friend and criminal defense attorney, Robert Callahan, and today we are breaking down The Lincoln Lawyer. Before we start, a quick reminder that each Monday is a Monday Mentors episode where we'll visit with a Texas lawyer with an established practice and ask them to share advice on how you can grow as a lawyer and reach your career goals. This past Monday, we talked with Kimber Davison, the managing shareholder and vice president of Griffith Davison in Dallas, a construction and real estate law firm, and she had some great things to share. You can catch all of our podcasts on your favorite podcast player or app, and also at varsitysearch.com/podcast. Finally, if you have suggestions for legal movies we should do on the show, or you want to appeal one of our verdicts on this or another episode, if you think we got it wrong, please tweet at Daniel Hare or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to Robert on his Facebook page, Justice Waco-Robert Callahan. All right. With that, let's roll, Earl.
Why can't you get a real office?
What's more fun, my office or your mom's?
Yours?
Boom. Louis Roulet, tell me what happened.
I'm innocent.
They picked him up with blood all over him.
You didn't strike her.
No, I am not that guy.
Are you sure there's not anything that you're not telling me?
Nothing.
This kid feels wrong to me. He switched out the files.
Why'd you lie to me?
You got one client in jail for what your other client did.
It's all confidential. Attorney-client privilege.
What you gonna do, Nick?
Your daughter, Haley, she's very pretty.
You think you're the first client to ever threaten my family?
I think he's headed for your house.
Mickey?
Wait for my call. I'm trying to make it right. Come on!
The Lincoln Lawyer.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Movie Verdicts.
What's up?
On Lone Star Lawyers podcast here. Robert Callahan back with us. Daniel Hare here. Varsity Search, Robert Callahan, Callahan and King. And today we've got The Lincoln Lawyer. This is a real fun one. Mm-hmm. It's from 2011. Matthew McConaughey. We mentioned on the last episode of the show that Marissa Tomei was the link between the two.
Didn't even recognize her in this.
Unintentionally, really?
Had no clue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are a divorced couple with a daughter, and both lawyers. She's a prosecutor. He's a defense lawyer. And Ryan Philippe, the other star of the movie, is playing the criminal defendant that Matthew McConaughey is going to represent. It's also got a really good cast, a deep cast. As I was going through it, William H. Macy plays the investigator. Josh Lucas has been in a lot of stuff as the ADA that winds up trying the case against McConaughey. John Leguizamo, Michael Pena, they both have important roles. Bob Gunton plays the family lawyer, who's maybe best known for Shawshank and some other things. You've also got Bryan Cranston, who's gone on to a lot of big things, of course. Trace Atkins playing the biker, which is fun. And then Earl, my man Earl, is Lawrence Mason. So good cast. It was a $40 million budget movie that made $75 million worldwide. It was adapted from a novel from Michael Connelly.
Yeah, didn't know that.
Yeah, no, not an original screenplay, but an adapted novel. I have not read the book, but I kind of want to now.
Yeah, it's on my list now.
Yeah, it's funny. I did not look at these before we picked these movies to start with, but 7.3 IMDb, 84 and 82 on the Rotten Tomatoes. So a real similar overall, both critic and audience score from for this movie, just like My Cousin Vinny, which we did. It's 21st on ABA's list of best legal movies, so kind of similarly placed there as well. But But yeah, so as we said, 2011. So a little bit more recent than the last one we did. So maybe more of you have seen this one. And Robert, what are your just initial thoughts about the movie before we hop into details here? But kind of what are some of the things that you think about when you think about Lincoln Lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I never quite figured out is why it was that his license was suspended. And I think that there was like an implication maybe that had to do with DWI or something like that. But
and there's a lot of scotch in this movie.
Yeah. That's true. Fair.
Yeah, so I think that's probably I don't know if we ever hear the actual answer to that question, but because he's...
It's got some great subtle accuracies. I know attorneys. This is set in California, I believe. Yes. But I know attorneys in Texas that are basically doing their work out of a car. You know, he's got a woman that is working out of her home. Then, you know, working as his assistant, his legal assistant. He's got, you know, his office in the car, basically, and he's, you know, running from court to court, trying to get stuff done on the fly. I think that there's some great little realistic points here. I love the relationships that Haller has with all the different people.
Yeah.
You know, he knows how
really shows. I mean, you get hit with that early in the movie.
Yeah.
With the ankle bracelet guy, who kind of connects him up with the case that he winds up being on. Mm-hmm. But you see it early on. Yeah.
Court staff, bondsmen, other attorneys, clients. He even has, you know, this, relationship of mutual disdain with the first prosecutor in the elevator, you know, and they're, going back and forth, and, it shows a little bit about attorneys and their private lives and how they work with their legal staff, their legal team, the investigator, you know, even kind of working the guy that is, it looks like a media person, but then ultimately ends up being sort of a stand-in.
I have a special award for that guy later in the show. Yes. One of my favorite little pieces. Yeah. No, it's, as we said, 2011. So at the time, Lady Gaga, "Born This Way" is the number one song on the charts. Charlie Sheen is getting fired from 2.5 Men, and giving his famous performance in that interview where he's got tiger blood and he's winning.
Blood.
You love to party. What's not to love? The world I was on made Jagger and Richard look like droopy-eyed armless children. That's how I party. That's how I party. I was banging 7-gram rocks. That's how I roll. Winning. I had one beer. Go. Epic. Winning. Are you bipolar? I'm bi. Winning. Win here. Win there. Win everywhere.
I couldn't resist. So that's going on. Yeah, if you haven't seen that, love it. This movie, I did not see it in theaters. This is now, I'm living in Oregon at the time, and we're not in a movie watching phase of our marriage, of our lives. We're not going to the theater that much. So, but I did see it. It sticks out in my mind because we went to a family vacation with my wife's family. Came out to visit us in Oregon. We went to the coast. And one night, we did a movie night in the house, and we watched the Lincoln Lawyer. And so I remember vividly watching it for the first time, and I remember thinking how good it was.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I was skeptical going into it. I don't know why.
Me too.
I was skeptical going in. And I'm one that has pretty much been on the McConaughey bandwagon for a long time. Since Dazed and Confused, I pretty much would watch everything that he did. And I know he had a kind of down and back up. But I was just there with him. But for some reason, I just didn't trust this movie. I don't know why.
Yeah, maybe it was oversaturation of McConaughey hype. You know, this was
maybe
after Time to Kill and all that. But I'm with you. I didn't see it in the movie for some reason. It was one of those movies that was kind of always on wherever you went. You went to a hotel or something, it was always on. So I saw like 90% of this movie just in different phases, over the course of time. And this was the first time that I actually sat down and watched it from start to finish uninterrupted.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, and I think probably in terms of the way that it was, and you can get a sense of the novelist too. Now that you know it's adapted, thinking about the way that this plot is written and the twists and the turns that they put him through over the course of this movie. And you mentioned it in our last episode, talking about the ethical dilemmas that sometimes criminal defense lawyers can go through.
Yeah.
I think we see that obviously a lot more in this one, and you probably get different opinions on how he navigates this situation that he finds himself in.
Yeah.
But you can see you've got the prosecutor ex-wife who they've clearly broken up primarily over his continuing to defend people she finds repugnant, and because she's the prosecutor, he's the defense lawyer, though they still love each other, but have a family bond with the daughter. But that's a key element throughout this movie.
Yeah, the ethics tones are all over the place here. I mean, you got some great stuff with. I mean, they really do, in my opinion, nail the attorney-client privilege, and just the dilemma that he's stuck with there. You can't. Now that he knows that the second client is responsible for the first client being in jail wrongfully, he can't blow the whistle on the second client, but he's got the first client that he needs to think about, and he can't set up the first client to look like he did the crime. Of course, that wouldn't have worked anyway because the first client was already in prison. But he nails zealous representation. He, even while he's going through all of this this minefield of ethics in the last stages of the trial, he's still doing a scathing cross-examination of the state's witnesses.
Oh yeah.
And like he's going to town,
he is.
But then I kind of feel like the overarching ethics question in the movie is sort of summed up in towards the end, the detective. So the client, Roulet, has been arrested for the murder of the first lady that had the snake tattoo. And, there's a detective that walks up to him as they're taking Roulet away, and he says something to the effect of, "Haller, you are one messed up son of a beep. I cannot figure out whose side you're on." And I don't really think that they ever answer the question, which maybe is kind of the lawyer's dilemma. And maybe that's just not necessarily trying to answer the question for the lawyers out there that are watching the movie, but just kind of saying like, yeah, we know that you're navigating this. It's good.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you see him. I think there's a point in the movie later where he talks about how the transition he goes through of not being able to recognize an innocent client, and also then not being able to, kind of back and forth between recognizing the guilty client, recognizing the innocent client, or just recognizing justice and all that too. And I think that's only what this is, the kind of the theme of the movie. Obviously, just as a quick recap of the plot. So he initially gets set up with Ryan Philippe, who's sort of a 30-year-old son of a wealthy family, who gets arrested for raping and beating a girl after a night at a club, and it turns out that there was a similar case that McConaughey's character had worked on back in the day. And we'll get to that scene, by the way. The flashback scene of him talking that client into pleading is a really emotional and powerful scene, I think. But so you kind of have these two things almost operating in parallel, although you don't know that they're connected until about midway through the movie, where McConaughey then starts to realize that perhaps he had given the bad advice to the first client, didn't listen to him, should have gone for further in defending him. And that ultimately his new client, Ryan Philippe's character, was the one who committed both acts, and then how to kind of navigate it. But
which I got a hot take about that. We can wait for later,
save it. Yeah, for sure. But definitely want to hear it. So, okay. best anything on with My Cousin Vinny, which we did, we had a lot. I felt like we had a lot of courtroom stuff there, and that's why it's so favored by so many in the legal practice. Right, there's a lot to take from it. There's not as much courtroom activity in this movie. A lot of what's going on is happening outside the courtroom.
Good point.
I think that's by design. I mean, I think that's watching him work in the shadows almost and in the background of what happens. That almost like, you know, he's navigating it and working a lot of these cases, not in front of a jury. I mean, he's doing it all. I mean, we see the plea from the first guy. We see, working behind the scenes on getting just even things like getting the snitch in there to testify. I mean, that's all stuff that's happening. Yeah. It eventually plays out in the courtroom setting, but it's the meat of it is the preliminary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
that's real life. I mean, probably only like 10% of cases in the criminal courtroom context actually go to trial. And then what you see in the courtroom is probably only 10% of the case. Right. And so there's all this stuff that's happening behind the scenes. And so I do think that they do a good job with that.
So the key pieces of evidence, I don't know if there was anything real, unless there was something that, in terms of procedurally was interesting. I mean, you had the knife, which was important because the William H. Macy's character is the investigator working for Haller, McConaughey's character, and he is, because of his relationships, able to get a preliminary file from his buddy in the DA's office or in the police report or whatever before it's coming over from the DA's office. Right. And in that file, it's a knife that is not connected to Louis Rollet, who is the client. And it's later that they find out that was somehow planted and was to throw him off course, that they actually did have a bloody knife that did belong to Rollet.
Yeah.
Right.
That was a really interesting thing, because I never understood whether Macy's character was saying that the person that set him up, that gave him the wrong knife, was the prosecutor or just somebody that worked in the prosecutor's office, or whether it was a police officer.
Yeah. I don't know that we knew who his source actually was, other than just someone in either law enforcement or in, I thought it was someone in law enforcement. So I thought it was someone from the police office as opposed to the DA's office, but that the police report came over in the pictures of the knife or whatever from them.
Yeah. I just kind of wondered about how much they were trying to make a comment on some sort of indiscretion, some sort of impropriety in law enforcement,
right?
Like some shady activity.
And I think they even say, maybe it's in voiceover, I can't remember, but they were saying how, as we kind of talked about in the last movie with the rules and everything, that he was going to get access to it eventually anyway, and it was just getting a head start. Is really all they were doing. But by doing that and cutting a corner, maybe they got fed bad info, and then it's later they figure out that there is a knife connected to the client, and that the client lied about it, among a few other things, which starts to kind of raise their suspicion about his innocence. You also have the nightclub video from the security camera at the nightclub that's capturing her pretty much tracking with his story, which is brushing up against him on the way to the bathroom, coming back, slipping him the napkin with the address on it, which she later on the stand says that's what happened. Which is, as you're watching it the first time through, you're not, I mean, I wasn't quite sure where this was all going, right? Because that story lines up with kind of the way he tells it. But at the same time, I don't know if this is just thinking back to some of the other movies he's been in, Cruel Intentions among others, where he just looks like he's got something going on that's wrong.
The clean guy that's a little dirty.
Looks like it's going to not end well with him. But
his story, it seems completely plausible up until the point where he gets to her place and then he's hit over the head, and that's maybe just because that's an unusual story. It just kind of raises a red flag. The investigator, Macy, his character, ends up kind of feeling that early on. But I thought that it was great that they showed the importance of going and grabbing that evidence early on. Yeah. Because, in real life, that, if there's any surveillance video or something like that, that stuff is there maybe 48 hours if you're lucky. And so, if you don't get in on the case early enough, that stuff's gone. Anything that's going to help you. Yeah. So, but, also, spoiler alert, clients do lie. It happens, and sometimes the stories will track pretty closely until some point where there's a huge diversion or a huge deviation. But Occam's razor applies here. The simplest explanation.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is great.
Yeah, no, and so you had the knife, you have the piece of evidence of the video from the club, and those are the two main pieces, and
blood on his hand.
Yeah, and so then you get to the best argument or the best cross, which you were saying, as much as once Haller figures out that the client is guilty not only of this crime but also of the other one, and now he's also threatening his family and everything else, he still is putting on a quite a case, and he's really going after the DA's witnesses and everything else, and really, I mean, it's a total mismatch in terms of the
talent,
and watching him kind of go after even the victim.
Right.
Which was interesting because, I mean, the victim, is she is a prostitute. So, of course, he's making that an issue. But otherwise, it's a fairly sympathetic witness. But he's going after her, even though, I mean,
And he picked one thing to hone in on, which was her bias, her motive. Why are you doing this? Which
right,
is
for the money, which is kind of what they were all trying to say from the beginning.
Yeah.
She was going after his money.
Yeah. And I mean, this is just a great example of choosing your battles on cross-examination. He didn't even really beat her up that much for being a prostitute. He went after, she was after his money, Roulet's money, and just the way that he did it, setting up. I loved on cross-examination where he's asking her, have you talked to an attorney? And she's kind of, hems and haws. And, well, did you talk to an attorney? Yeah, I talked to one, but it was just talk. And then he says, well, did y'all talk about getting damages? And she says, well, I thought, all that's covered by attorney-client privilege. And he says, well, you can share that with us if you want to.
Right.
And it just leaves it. And I mean, there's no bad answer there. If she says, yeah, we talked and the number was 2 million, or she, in this case, she says, well, I'd rather keep that secret. That leaves more to the imagination.
Or like, oh yeah, how much, what number are those jurors thinking? No, it was good. He basically plants the jailhouse snitch and then goes after him. And walks the line there with him.
Yeah, there's one thing that I didn't quite completely understand. So I know that he had his former drug addict client that was in prison in the same unit reach out to him. And she said the prosecutor, basically wants you to say these things. And so it kind of feeds the information.
Yeah.
But how did he know that the prosecutor was going to call Corliss?
So my impression was somehow I got the impression that the snitch reached out to the prosecutor.
Okay.
Like that's what she told him to do.
Okay.
So Haller tells his drug addict client, who tells the snitch, who then reaches out to the DA and says, hey, I think I might have something for you.
Okay. Yeah, that was
my impression of it.
Yeah, he was playing chess and we were all playing Catan. That was
Is jailhouse snitch a thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, no, it is a thing, and it comes up a lot in murder cases. And I send a letter to my client very early on. I tell him in person, and I send a letter in writing, and I say, don't talk. From this point on, you got to shut up. You got the right to remain silent. Use it, because today's friends in the tank with you will become tomorrow's snitches. And there is actually a network of information that's, for lack of a better word, for sale within the jail. And every once in a while, you'll find that it's exposed where somebody that wasn't anywhere near a crime scene will say, I have information about so and such case, and they've gotten that information from someone else, or maybe the original source, but it's like 10 times removed. And whatever currency is traded in exchange for that information, they know that that testimony can help them. So like you get
Right.
guys that have zero connection to a case that will come testify for the state in order to try to get a break in their case. And what's really interesting is the way that things are done most of the time is you can't get a prosecutor to write a proffer letter. They won't say this is the thing that your client will potentially get in consideration. They'll just kind of leave it vague and say, well, I can't promise you anything. It can only help you. You're doing this out of your own goodness of your own heart, which, the witness even says that,
Yeah.
you're not expecting any benefit from this. So you go in there and you testify just because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And obviously there's a line to walk when you're a prosecutor or you're in law enforcement, because sometimes you do get good, valid information from jailhouse snitches, but they should definitely be looked at with a critical eye.
Yeah, no doubt. I mentioned it earlier, but I mean, it really felt like the ADA was just. I mean, it felt like he had a better case than what he was presenting. I mean, and some of the, I mean, and the chance that he had to cross Roulet at the end, and he just, I mean, the mom, I mean, he just felt, it just felt like he was totally, had his maybe legs caught from under him somewhere and just never got his confidence back. But it was weird to watch him, knowing that McConaughey was sort of giving just good enough to convince his client he was advocating on his behalf while at the same time setting him up. And yet this DA who should have had a good case.
Yeah.
Really was struggling.
Yeah. So he seemed like a competent enough attorney. And I think McConaughey even says, this is the new guy. I got to go talk to the new guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, he seemed competent enough, and this should have been a slam dunk case. But that really is the reality of trial law, which is that you're in the courtroom and things go wrong. Witnesses don't show up. They testify different than you thought that they would. They get intimidated. They get scared. They get nervous. They leave out details. They'll remember facts, misremember facts. And so you really do have to take into consideration on both sides of the case the fact that what you think you have going into a courtroom can be quite different once you get in front of a jury. And I even tell my clients, and I've told prosecutors this. There's kind of when I started practicing defense, one of the guide verses for me was Matthew 5:25. It says, "Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and the officer may be thrown into and you may be thrown into prison." Which Robert translation is, everything can go sideways when you get into the courtroom. Everybody's got skin in the game, and you got to realize, even if you're a prosecutor with a slam dunk case, that things can change. And so don't push it if you don't have to.
Yeah, no, I think that's wise counsel, obviously. His shock at the mom's answer on why Roulet carries the knife. He has no idea she's about to drop that she was assaulted, which, like you said, things go wrong. That went real wrong.
Yeah.
And he had no idea. And I didn't know. I need to look this, but that we have we didn't explore this in the movie, but this rash of the dangerous world of real estate.
Yeah.
Real estate representation. It makes sense as they lay it out in the movie. You kind of can go with the storyline. I don't know if it's actually true or not, that it's a dangerous profession and that you can get assaulted and attacked on showing houses, but it makes sense.
No,
actually.
yeah. I've heard realtors say that they won't go to a showing alone because of that.
Yeah,
and because it's just you and the person inside the house, and then there's a story in the Waco Trib, I think this week, about some weird guy out of maybe California who was stalking realtors, women realtors. Yeah, and it started with an investigation here in Waco, and a couple of women were targeted, but then come to find out across the country, he's sending emails and phone calls and talking about realtors' children. So I think that's a real thing.
Yeah. So my favorite little piece of procedural posturing, I guess, is not against an adversary, but against his own client. This is great because you always got to watch out for Mr. Green.
Yeah,
Mr. Green's important. So let's listen to that.
Harold, you shouldn't be running from your lawyer. It's bad form. And you know what I want to talk about? In a minute, Judge Powell's going to call us down. He's going to want to know if we're ready for trial.
We are?
We are not. And you know why not. Rule 1, I get paid or I don't work.
Don't worry, I got your money.
Exactly. You got it. I don't.
It's coming. I talked to my boys.
Listen, Harold, I looked on the list of people I trust. You're not on it.
The law says you can't just quit. The judge won't let you. I looked it up.
smart.
Pay close attention. Michael Holler for the defense, Your Honor. If I may, I'd like to carry this over.
Do you have a reason, Mr. Holler?
Having trouble locating a witness, Your Honor. An indispensable witness, a Mr. Green.
How much time do you need?
That's hard to say.
Does the state object?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to hold this over pending notification from counsel.
Love it. You know, that's a real thing. That is a real
Harold.
thing.
Oh, that's great.
I have heard lawyers use this after this movie came out. They have actually stood in front of a judge in a courtroom and said, "We're looking for Mr. Green, Your Honor." Everybody knows it's great.
And everybody knows, well, and I was reading about it's referred, I guess, to a Chicago court kind of myth or legend that's what would happen all the time is the lawyers would go in there and say Mr. Green hasn't shown up or we don't know where Mr. Green is, and then they would continue cases or dispose them or whatever. But a classic for sure.
I love the realistic commentary on the importance of being able to keep the lights on and feed your mouth as a lawyer, and realizing that you are, as an attorney, I realized this as a defense attorney. I didn't realize this before because I'd never had a business education background or anything like that. So I had to figure all this out when I went out and practice. And you are 100% of the time a lawyer, and you are 100% of the time a business person. Yeah. You are not 50-50. You got to be thinking about both things at the same time. And you have to be thinking about limited resources and limited time and things like that. And so, one of the most important things that a lawyer told me when I started practice is get your money up front. And it's so true. And I'll tell young lawyers now, listen, these clients are smart enough to do a little bit of legal research and realize what they can get away with, and they know how to push the limit, and they will try to buy a lawyer on layaway if you let them. And so you really have to understand they look at you as sometimes some clients can look at you as a hired gun. Some clients can look at you and just think that you're basically supposed to dance on the pole for them. Yeah. And so before you hop on that pole, you get your money up front because you may not get the rest of it later. So right. That's great.
I do have the other clip where he goes and gets it from his boys, which is the biker gang.
Not bad. Your ride's a little messy.
Yeah, May doesn't come till Tuesday. What can I do for you, big man?
Our boy Harold called from the pen, said you're stalling his case till you see some more green.
I don't get paid. I don't work.
We paid you $5,000.
That's long gone, Eddie. Now, look, I could tell you that half of it went to an aerial photo expert. He's going to blow the state's case by showing that the DEA violated the airspace over Harold's farm by flying too low. I could also tell you that I got to fly that guy in from New York City, get him to testify, put him up in a hotel and all that kind of stuff, but you don't need to know that. All you need to know is that we had a deal. It's time to refill the tank.
What? Another $5,000?
10. He wants to fly business. He wants a first-class hotel.
And we want Harold back on the farm. He's our best farmer, if you know what I mean.
I don't, and I don't want to. Now, look, either pay me or go with a public defender. He won't know much about airspace, but...
I love it.
That's good. Holding that pack of money.
Shakes it.
You gonna count it?
I just did.
Oh, yeah, just did.
Keep that rub.
Just classic McConaughey. That's just great.
Oh, it's all, yeah, no, it's him to a T. I love that. And we get a shot there of Earl, who we hadn't mentioned, who's driving the Lincoln around for McConaughey. You mentioned it, who at some point didn't have his license, suspended for something, probably WI type thing. There's a little scene at the beginning where Earl says to him, "Hey, if things aren't when you get your license back, I know this is supposed to be temporary, but I'd like to maybe stay on." And McConaughey says, "Got my license back 3 months ago, Earl."
Yeah.
You're with me, man.
Yeah.
But he's got the headphones. So we were talking about ethics and confidentiality, attorney client. He tells him when gets the call from the client, they're on the headphones.
Yeah.
And so he's got the big old headphones to drive around and let him talk to his client.
That's great. And I mean, and just the value of those extra 10, 20, 60 minutes on your way to courtroom. If I could have somebody drive me around.
Drive you around the Lincoln?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in the Lincoln, no less.
We talking about best prep work and discovery investigative work. Obviously, there's an investigator as a main character in this case. So there's a lot of them. He's digging up stuff. But actually, one that we haven't talked about yet, we've talked about a few already, is when McConaughey realizes that, or is first starting to kind of realize that the two cases may be connected. His old case with his guy back in jail, and then the new case. And he goes back through his files, apparently in like his storage closet or an office in his house or something. He's digging stuff up and finds the old photos of the girl from the first case and starts to see the parallels.
Yep. Great use of a flashback.
Yeah, between the two. I thought that was interesting. And that leads him then to go out to the jail and visit his former client. And just before that, we see the flashback scene, which I mentioned earlier. I thought was one of the more powerful scenes in the movie, where it's years before, but he's having the conversation with the client about how, look, it's your alibi is not going to work, your defense is not going to work, you're going to wind up getting the death penalty, and I can save you from that. If you plead, you can get life and out in 15 years. And the guy's just trembling. The guy is just trembling. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I can't do this.
Young guy, probably never been in the system before. Scared to death, shaking like a leaf. And I'll tell you, this goes to my hot take. I get it. I see why they did it. They set it up really well, created this dilemma. McConaughey really brings it home as a lawyer trying to get his client to do what's in his best interest at the time. But I'll tell you, he made the right decision. Like, he cannot be, realistically, is there, what are the chances that a lawyer gets the second case where, the first client was set up by the second client? All that aside, this client, he's going through all this information that they have in the discovery with Jesus Martinez in the jail. And he says, look, you gave a partial confession. You admitted to the police officer to being in the apartment, which he didn't have until you gave that to him.
Right.
3 witnesses saw you throw a knife in the L.A. River. You left your semen on a towel. The place was wiped down for prints afterwards. I mean, that guy was. I mean, they were going to get him. They were going to get their conviction.
Sure.
So absolutely, that was. Now, I don't know what the rules are in terms of sentencing and the guidelines that they use in California, but I mean, taking a plea under those circumstances, getting life without even the possibility of parole would have been better than the death penalty. And so that was the right decision in that moment.
Yeah, no, tough. I mean, just a tough scene, emotional scene. Let's see. Best judge moment. We didn't have as many in this one. We had a classic judge character in the last one. The judge in this movie is more of a there to kind of move the proceeding along, but not really becoming a main character. But he does dress down the ADA after he put the jailhouse snitch on the stand, who had been already known to have lied on the stand in the past and helped put away innocent people. And what was interesting, I wanted to get your take on this though. That all happens in front of the jury. The snitch is up there. He's going through that, and just as the normal course of impeachment of him is Haller going after him and saying, "Hey, have you done this before? Here's this newspaper article where you did this, and the guy wound up in jail. He didn't do it, and you did." And to me, it looked to me like a fairly. I mean, it's all happening for the jury, so it looks pretty above board that the jury can see okay, I need to discount that testimony completely. This was a terrible witness. This is bad for the prosecutor. I didn't quite make the entire leap in my head the way the judge did there, that like the whole trial was tainted.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
So yeah, I think right before that is my best judge moment, where Corliss gets called as a witness for the first time. Prosecution says, "Hey, we got the surprise witness," and McConaughey stands up and says, "Who is this witness? Why haven't we been told about him?" And the judge, it's really subtle. He excuses the jury. That's important because a judge in real life, he isn't gonna let that battle play out in front of a jury,
right?
Because that just kind of throws the whole thing into chaos, and then the jury's like, "Yeah, prosecutor, why are you calling this guy last minute?" Probably the better thing. I could see a judge being so upset that the prosecutor did violate procedure by calling this surprise witness and not giving any heads up to the defense, that he doesn't get on the defense for making that objection in front of the jury. But probably most judges want the defense attorney to approach and then make their objection outside the hearing of the jury. But yeah, when they get in chambers, judges are very concerned typically about the integrity of their case record. And what I mean by that is not the judge's wins and losses, but the right to a fair trial. They are concerned with making sure that, these cases, if they are ending in convictions, that they hold up on appeal, because, the defense attorney had the opportunity to fight with both hands, not one tied behind his back, somewhat. They want to make sure that the prosecution's doing everything above board. So yeah, the way that it played out, the way that the judge sees it is, you got this shady witness who's testified in other cases. One case in which we know the defendant was innocent because he was exonerated later. And this prosecutor is calling this witness last minute without notice to the defense. And that all, there's only one thing that the prosecutor did wrong in all that, but the way it looks to the judge is really bad. And you can never get your credibility back when you mess up like that in front of a judge.
Yeah, no, for sure. Best non-lawyer assist in this one. You had an investigator basically give his life for this case.
Yeah. True.
So that's it. You mentioned it earlier, the freelance video guy. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that was great. So when Howler's first trying to get the kind of seal the deal to get the representation, he's already met with Roulet. He's met with the family lawyer who's kind of making the shot, calling the shots on it. And they walk out of the courthouse, and there's a video guy there. The family's from money, has some stance in the community apparently, and so it's not surprising to the family lawyer that there might have been someone there to try to capture some B-roll or some footage. And so you watch it and you're seeing it happen, and McConaughey, to make an impression on the family lawyer, calls the guy over and says, "Hey man, what are you doing? You freelancing?" And he's like, "Yeah, I thought I might make a little money getting this to a news station." And he said, "How much?" And so what are you talking about? And he winds up paying him for the tape, more than he would have gotten from the TV station or wherever. And you think, oh, that's a pretty good little trick to win over the family lawyer who's standing right there, and kind of save the family some embarrassment and all that, and make some whatever. And then a minute later, he's rolling down the street and gives whatever half of it back to the guy, and it was all staged from the beginning. How about that?
Yeah, just the levels. This guy's got just Batman keen sense of the way that the system is all played out is great.
Yeah. Well, and Earl even says something like that. Or Earl says something to him like, "You'd have done pretty well on the streets."
Yeah.
And Howler says, "What do you think I do? Or what do you think I am?"
Where do you think I am?
Yeah, that's exactly what I am.
These streets is rough.
That's right. Man, we had some witnesses. So we already talked about the jailhouse snitch. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but the John, the greasy guy.
Yeah. And he plays that up, man.
What in the world is going on with this guy? That was one where I was like, really? Would this really ever? A guy get up there and say the stuff he's saying was bizarre to me.
Yeah, he just
kind of bragging on just all the stuff. It was just, it was crazy.
Talking about sexual prowess, and she was satisfied.
Yeah. Man, it was bad. But then, Yeah, and then of course the mom dropping the bomb on the DA,
which is just strategically is such a great setup. I don't know if this was smart or not. The rule is on cross-examination, you don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. And maybe because he knew that this guy's young, the new ADA, he's kind of leading him into a trap maybe, intentionally, but he doesn't go there with the mom. McConaughey doesn't ask her that stuff on direct. And usually, what if the ADA decided for whatever reason, I'm not going to cross-examine this witness? No, probably unlikely, but could have happened. Mm-hmm. He takes a calculated risk of not going through that testimony with the mom on direct. And that way, the ADA becomes the bad guy when he starts asking questions. He walks right into this trap, just gets completely shut down. She dunks on him. And then, he's done. His cross-examination is over.
Right.
Which is just a really slick way to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. In real life, I don't know. It's smart, but I don't know if it works in real life.
Right.
But I like it in the movie.
I liked it in the movie. Best client moment. It's tough in this one because you've got, really the worst client of all time. In reality here. Breaks into your house and is sitting there waiting for you when you come in, threatening your family, kills your investigator. Well, I guess he or his mom does.
Right.
And because at that time you don't really know the mom's level of involvement, but clearly she's involved more than you know. And then taking the stand, which I'm sure as a criminal defendant, taking the stand is high risk, high reward, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right. But he was wanting to get up there and make his little sad, story of how his life's been disrupted.
Yeah.
kind of story.
Which, it's usually the clients that you want to testify that don't want to testify.
Yeah.
It's their choice. It's the clients that you don't want to testify that want to get up on the stand and demand to testify.
Right.
And say things that they shouldn't say. But, really interesting, going back to ethics, a really interesting situation where he knows that this guy is getting ready to get on the stand and lie.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't ask him as much as he could. A lot of the detail that was given on the stand was kind of non-responsive. It was just a lot of rambling at the end, and I'm innocent and I didn't do this and all that other stuff. And so, he has an out in that he didn't ask that question, but you can't suborn perjury. So really, really interesting dilemma that he was in on, the client wants to testify. So how do you navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that they handle it pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Another key moment, I mentioned earlier, kind of the emotional scene with the former client in jail. The other kind of one that gets you is after his investigator friend is murdered, and it's after the client's been in his house, and then he's in his house, McConaughey's in his house, and talking to the DA the police, on the phone, because he's figured out that, or he's heard a message that his investigator friend left on the answering machine just before he died. And he's on the phone with the police to tell her the story and to kind of say, hey, I need to get this tape to you, whatever. And then she's starting to tell him about the gun. When he realizes that the type of gun that they used was one that he had, and he opens up that box to his basically the Mickey Cohen gift gun, the gun from his dad, who was a defense lawyer, we learned there, and defended Mickey Cohen, old gangster guy. And so it has this gun, and that's what obviously the client had taken out and used on the investigator. And you just open that box and it's empty.
Yeah.
And you know the gun's gone.
Yeah.
And you know it was used against the investigator, your friend.
Yeah.
It's killer.
Yeah. And again, I think that 9 out of 10 attorneys in that situation are going to probably, if they say, well, why didn't you report the gun stolen? I think that it comes out, what attorney-client privilege or not. I think
Yeah.
I think it comes out at that point, and they really did a good job making McConaughey hold himself to those rules. I think that's admirable. That's great. I think the best client interaction moment was McConaughey talking to the client for the first time in that conference, and he kicks Mom out of the room.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he
That's right, we
says,
didn't talk about that yet.
everything that I'm about to talk to you about, if there is someone that's in the room that's not you, basically, then the DA can subpoena that person, about the conversation. So, parents, great that you're here. We appreciate your support, but you got to go. I thought that was great.
No, it was. The other thing I wanted to touch on, we've hinted at it with some different pieces, but is best government intervention. So you really have a line of just real antagonizing from the police to Howler throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
It's coming from there's kind of one tough guy cop at the beginning
Curlin,
who was a piece of the who was a part of the first case that he had.
Yeah.
And he's kind of with him the whole movie. Bryan Cranston also plays a cop who's on the verge of retiring, and McConaughey makes it known that he's looking forward to that day. But even like right when, and I should give some leeway to the fact that they actually think McConaughey is a suspect for some reason in the before they get to the gun. They think he's a suspect in the death of his friend, the investigator. But I mean, clearly McConaughey is distressed and just lost his friend, but Cranston's just railing on him and giving him crap, and so that was tough. And then you got just all the way through. It seems like back to that. Whose side are you on? Stuff that you brought up earlier.
And I mean, case in point, this shows how important it is to develop these relationships, right? I mean, he has, other than Curlin and the detective that Cranston is like, he's got a working relationship with the district attorney's office to some extent. He's got a working relationship with law enforcement to some extent. His ex-wife she was a prosecutor or a police officer? I can't remember.
The ex-wife is a prosecutor.
Yeah, prosecutor. Yeah. Which how would you like to have that marriage? That is awkward. I mean, you're like, hey, honey, how'd you spend the day? Well, I spent the whole day stacking up bricks. And what'd you do today? I spent the whole day knocking your bricks down.
Yeah, exactly. You could tell that was a source of tension in the relationship.
But yeah, it does show that it's good to have those connections. He's able to use those connections to get the right outcome towards the end, and so that's good.
Yeah, I did think it was odd that throughout we talk about how kind of he maneuvered all these relationships and was so good at it. And the fact that he didn't know the bailiff's name at the beginning was really strange. He missed it by a couple of syllables. I can't remember if he called him Roberto and it was Ronaldo, I think is what it was, or something like that. And I was like, there's no way he messes this up. Like he'd gotten him gifts in the past. He obviously relied on him to get his guy up to the front of the line on different arraignments and different things like that and help him get through the stuff. But that was that was out of character for him.
Well,
a little
was
bit.
It though? Because I kind of feel like he was saying this is a way of communicating that the relationships that McConaughey has, they serve him.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and so it's not that he's invested in this bailiff. He really knows this guy. It's not that he's invested in these people in the court system. It's that they're functional. They have a certain utility to him.
I think that's totally right. I think my observation is more for his own benefit. I think he would have known the guy's name. Not because he wanted to be a good friend or a good guy to the bailiff.
Fair enough. I think I win that argument, though.
So that's our government intervention or government acting throughout the movie. So I kind of hinted at this earlier for our little quick recess here. There's a lot of scotch in this movie that's getting drank between Howler, the investigator, the ex-wife, Marissa Tomei's character. I mean, they all are going out for drinks afterwards. And then the client, Roulet, is also, when he's hanging out in the house waiting for McConaughey to come home, he's already busted into the scotch bottle. Yeah. And I don't know, there's at least 3 scenes, I think, of McConaughey's character driven home after long nights and all that. So, and back to, I think we talk about it, the issue of alcohol within the legal community and lawyers, right. and you know, it is prevalent. So I think that is realistic.
Yeah.
And you know, at least in the case of this scene that we saw, the scenes that we saw, he was getting driven home, which was good. There were people taking care of him. The friend, the wife, ex-wife. But clearly there had been at least some issue before because he had his suspended license on this driver.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I do know a lot of attorneys that drink scotch. I think that's accurate. You a scotch guy?
Yeah. I have become more interested in it in the last probably 5 years than I was before. Yeah. And I don't know if that's just because we have balcones here and it's become a thing. And so it's easier to kind of, let's go by there. Let's have something. But, and then some of our friends like to make a pretty good old fashioned and so just having some, you know, some bourbon in there, or whatever, some whiskey, whatever. So you know, it just is something that I didn't used to have a taste for. Yeah. That I will enjoy every now and then now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I feel like it's sort of the hallmark of the Western man. It's like you got to be, you got to drink scotch and you smoke cigars. And
I think I had a college friend that tried to sell me on that when I was like 22, and I definitely didn't like it then. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So to kind of turn the corner on this one, so as we go throughout the movie, he really is threading the needle here between representing his client and also trying to do right by the guy his former client that has taken the fall for a crime that clearly Roulet committed, and he does it at the end by getting him off for the crime. The current crime in his current role as a lawyer for his client. Good job.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Attaboy.
Yep. They said it a couple of times, death by 1,000 razors to the prosecutor, and then kind of a big sledgehammer at the end with the judge basically making him toss the case out. And then as soon as he's off, in the hallway outside the courthouse, getting rearrested for the original crime, the first crime. And what I love about that is it stems from that look that McConaughey gives the hard-ass cop, who he brings in so that he can hear the testimony, know what McConaughey's doing,
slick,
and figure out, this guy's my guy for this thing, and go after it and go get it done.
Yeah, he's got this Batman sensibility. It's just ridiculous. He's just a real smart guy.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are the odds that this prosecutor keeps his job after this trial? I can just imagine this is his first case.
Oh my gosh.
Right? He's new on the job. Maybe he's fresh out of law school, or he's a transfer from another DA's office or something like that. And then this thing just goes completely sideways.
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think, man, I want to say he keeps his job, but then there's a lot of me that says he might not. And mainly because it is high profile, and it is this. I mean, just in the era of Me Too, and this movie is happening pre Me Too, but not like in today. Like, I just don't think there's any way a prosecutor like that keeps his job after something like that, especially with a high profile defendant who looks like he's getting away with it. It looks like some of these cases we've had of wealthy white whatever people that can get off by hiring the best attorney. That's exactly what this is. That's what it looks like. So I think the prosecutor's probably in some trouble.
I think he's prosecuting cases in Alabama now. Small courtroom.
Man,
double murder case involving
and then you think it's over.
Right.
And then we still have some more, because what happens is he's he gets the guy arrested for the second crime, says go find a new lawyer. That's great. So my services to you are completed.
Yeah, right.
Go find a new lawyer. but we learned that they can't hold him on the crime of the first crime. So they arrest him, but they can't hold him, and that leads to immediate, now more stressful threats on the family's life because now he's out,
right?
And he calls in a favor with the bikers. Yeah. They come rough him up a little bit in front of the house.
The train is going by, no less. The train with the assist on the sound. Out there with bats
and busting up the Maserati, or I can't remember. Did he have the Maserati that day? I can't remember. They made a big deal about him either driving the Maserati or the Range Rover.
Right. It says hospital, not the morgue, or something.
And yeah, hospital, not the morgue, Eddie.
I love it.
No. And then the final twist at the end when he walks back into his house and it's the mom.
Yeah.
And who that's who puts a bullet into him.
Yeah.
You do not see that. I did not see that coming.
No, I didn't see that coming.
I mean,
I thought the movie ends when the guy is getting taken into custody.
Well, that's where it felt like it was ending, right there. And then you had two fairly climactic things happening after that. I mean, between kind of the little standoff at the house with the bikers and beating him to it. Back to the relationships with the ankle bracelet guy. Yeah, getting the tracker on him, figuring out that's where he was headed. Yeah, and all that. Stay in front. And then the mom he the one piece you knew is, and maybe the clue should have been Earl had gotten him the gun. Mm-hmm. So he'd asked Earl to get him a gun at some point earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. You didn't know that's what it was at the time. Right. It was, do me a favor, get me something. Mm-hmm. And after the second arrest of Roulet, then you've got Earl saying, "Hey, I got you this," or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, but he hadn't used it yet. And why, and I guess at the time I just thought maybe it was just for protection or whatever. Right. And it was.
In Texas, that guy gets shot. I mean, I'm sorry. You roll up to my ex-wife's house with my daughter, and I've already got the DA looking at you sideways because they think that you've committed one murder. Yeah. That guy gets shot in Texas. Absolutely.
So that was at the ex-wife's house, but they're gone, right? Because he sent her to the sister's house. So it's just him and him. It's just the two guys there. Yeah. So that was the first time I saw it, I think I was a little confused about it. I was like, okay, wait, are they in there or are they not in there? Whose house are we? Because we hadn't seen that, or we'd seen that house, but it was dark in the other times we'd seen it, and now it's light out, and it's anyway. But no, so it's just the two of them. But then the mom turns out to be as bad or worse than the son.
The apple in the tree.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's no doubt about it. But no. All right. Well, final thoughts. The Lincoln Lawyer. Solid. Like you said earlier. I want to read the book. Yeah. I think I did read where the author Michael Connelly was really happy with how the movie turned out and thought it tracked real closely with the way he had written the book. So that's not always the case, and I think most of the overall presentation of the movie tracks with the book. So that's good. Have to check that out, But yeah, this is, McConaughey's been in some legal movies. Obviously, A Time to Kill was one of his big breaks back in the 90s, and we'll probably hit that one at some point. But, this is him now 20 years later or so, and he's still doing a good job playing a lawyer.
Yeah,
and
I don't think he can do wrong as a lawyer.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good feel for that, seems like.
This book series, we got The Lincoln Lawyer 2005, The Brass Verdict 2008, The Reversal 2010, The Fifth Witness 2011, The Gods of Guilt 2013, and The Crossing 2015. So worth looking into. I'm definitely going to check those out. I think that a lot of people love McConaughey in the legal role. My favorite McConaughey is sort of action star adjacent, Sahara, was it Fool's Gold, the one that he did where he was like with the boats and things like that. And I think that's where he's kind of at his greatest. But I love the dialogue in this. You can't beat it. Really good storytelling. I love the tension and all the different ethical traps that are going on. I think it's for young lawyers in particular, it would be worth mentioning. There's a great book by Joseph Allegretti called The Lawyer's Calling. And this is actually part of a class that I teach at Baylor undergrad sometimes. And it's about how you navigate the tension between your ethical obligations as an attorney and your calling or the ethics that you are called to in your philosophical or your religious belief system. And so basically Allegretti, he's a lawyer. He feels like a hired gun his whole life. This is his kind of a biography or an autobiography. And he's talking about how he gets tired of feeling like he's just a hired gun. So he goes to seminary and finds a whole bunch of other burnt out lawyers who went to seminary. And he's like, there's got to be a way to reconcile these two. And so he spends a whole book, figuring out how to do that. It's a really good read. So that's one of the things that I would have liked to see land in this movie is, McConaughey kind of figuring out, how do I do right by my clients and do right by the code that I'm bound to, but at the same time, remain true to my greater ethics, as opposed to what I can get away with.
Right.
But I mean, it's a really good movie. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
No complaints.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also one that at the end, at the very, very end, a different movie would maybe have him decide to give up being a criminal defense lawyer,
right?
Maybe switch over to being a prosecutor,
kind of
any of those kind of things. But he's right back in that Lincoln at the end, and working with the bikers again, and he's doing his thing.
No, that's a great point. That's a really good point, because I do think that the way, if you can't reconcile the tension, then what you end up doing is you give one up. And so you say, I'm not going to try to wade through this anymore. I'm just going to go with the moral clarity that seems to come with choosing one side. And oftentimes when you're a prosecutor, you start to look at things a certain way, and it's an adversarial system, but we're not supposed to be completely adversarial. There's supposed to be a certain degree to which prosecutors and the rest of the legal system, including defense attorneys, can work together in order to make sure that justice is done. But, at the end of the day, not everybody can reconcile those two. So,
Yeah. Well, so what's your verdict? How many gavels would you give this one?
Man, so I want to say about like an 85. Now, here's a question. So, remember in elementary school where like they changed the grading system? It used to be like a 94 to 100 was an A,
and then all of a sudden it was 90.
Like 90, yeah. So where are we on here? I'm going to go with the 10 system. So I'm going to give it 85, solid B plus. I want to give it more because it's McConaughey. But it's kind of a lawyer adjacent movie. Yeah. So I'm gonna stick with 85 gavels.
Yeah, it's a thriller first. It seems like because of it's set in a legal environment, but I don't think it doesn't take anything away from it for me. I'm going to give it an 83. What did you say?
Ooh, 85.
Yeah, you were 85. So we're right there. We're at 84 on average for the two of us. So that's our verdict. If you don't like it, you want to appeal it,
deal with it. No. Let us know.
Let us know what you think. Daniel Hare on Twitter, at Daniel Hare on Twitter, Daniel at varsitysearch.com you could email. We'll if we have just a upswell of like we totally underrated this movie or overrated or something like that, we will address that, and you can win your appeal with us. But
now for reference, what did you give on My Cousin Vinny?
So on My Cousin Vinny, I gave an 85. So I gave 85 on Vinny, and I gave an 83 on this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see you.
You went 99 on Vinny.
99.
So tough to beat. Yeah. Set the bar high right out of the gate. So, but nevertheless, The Lincoln Lawyer is an outstanding movie. We enjoyed it very much, and it was fun to go back and check it out again. So yeah, thanks for being with us, Robert.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Until the next one. See you, everybody.